You're listening to the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast with Paula Engebretson, episode number 230. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you? How was your week? If you listened to last week's episode, number 229, all about emotions, you know that we spent quite a bit of time exploring the top 10 reasons why I think so many of us feel such resistance to allowing and processing through our emotions. Now, as ADHD brains, we do tend to feel some pretty big feelings. And what I've noticed upon working with so many different clients over the years is that most of us have never actually learned why it's so important for us to allow our emotions. And certainly we haven't learned how to actually do it. So I hope that over the past week, you've uncovered a bit more awareness around your particular emotions this season, what you're often feeling. And I hope you've maybe uncovered some of the reasons, some of those barriers that are keeping you from allowing your emotions, whether it's social stigma or the fear of the intensity, or maybe you're shielding against vulnerability with busyness. Maybe you think things are going to take forever if you allow for the emotions, right? So I hope that you were able to identify your most common emotions this season and also which barriers were getting in the way, because today we are exploring a powerful yet accessible way to help you start identifying the emotions that you're experiencing, recognizing how they actually feel in your body, and how to allow and be with them without so much resistance. How you can actually allow them to be in your body and move through them, process through them so they're not waiting in your body any longer without all that pushback. So let's talk about this. We want to learn how to allow and process our feelings. What the heck does this even mean? How do we do it? Also, why on earth does it even matter? Can't we just keep pushing it away? It's been fine, right? So, as you may remember from my botched poached eggs example last episode, we actually can't just keep pushing things away, not in a very effective way anyway, because they don't actually go anywhere. Those emotions don't go anywhere when we keep pushing them away. We just shove them down further. Right? They just sit there in our bodies, unprocessed, bubbling under the surface, waiting to explode in one way or another. And in fact, learning how to pause, learning how to sit with our feelings and allow them to process through our bodies in the moment, either when we're activated or maybe later on when we can kind of step away and have some space. This is a skill that I work on quite frequently with my clients because emotional regulation, it's a huge obstacle for many of us with ADHD and ADHD tendencies. It is something that can stop us from taking the actions we want to take. They prevent us from tackling that pile of laundry we've been meaning to wash for days. The emotions stop us from completing the materials for next week's board meeting on time. It can stop us from sticking with our personal goal of doing yoga 4 times a week. I mean, these emotions can really keep us from doing those things we want to do. If we don't know how to allow and be with our feelings, all of those challenges and goals and projects on our list become so much more challenging. Because not only do we have to learn the new skill or do the hard thing, but then we also have to do it while resisting this emotion. It's like we're putting this extra barrier in our way, making it even harder. But when we can learn how to slow down and open up and process through that feeling first, we remove that initial barrier so that we can lean in and actually focus on taking the needed action or starting the project or laying out the yoga mat or whatever it is. Now, what if we feel a lot of resistance to simply slowing down and being with our feelings, right? What can we do if we really feel hesitant or we don't know how to do it? How can we learn how to increase our capacity for this important skill? Well, that is where today's strategy comes in, which I think does a really great job of helping you to actually get to know how these big emotions feel in your body without forcing you to be in super emotional situations, which again, I think is a win-win. Okay, so let me explain what I mean, and then we'll get into some examples here. So most of us, again, automatically just kind of resist and push away uncomfortable emotions when they stem from our personal lives, right? If we get into an argument or we feel anxious about a job interview or we get bad feedback from a client or we're in a chronically high stress situation, we often just want to push it away and not think about it. We just want to feel better. We don't want to slow down. We don't want to feel the anxiousness. And again, this makes sense when we talk about the 10 different reasons we explored last week in episode 229. However, I've also noticed that many of us are much more tolerant of learning how to allow and experience these same emotions when they're not connected to us, and instead they're connected to an outside story or narrative. Here's what I mean. If you are reading a book and there's a moment of sadness or grief that comes up in the plot line, I'm guessing you probably have an easier time feeling that sadness in the plot line, right? You probably cry or you feel the heaviness in your chest. You probably are pretty comfortable with that, right? You're not thinking, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. I shouldn't feel this way. What's wrong with me? I probably need a little retail therapy to feel better. No, you're sad because you're reading a sad book and it makes sense to feel sad. You're sad because something sad happened in the book and you're thinking this is so sad and you want to feel sad about it. So the desire to escape that situation is much lower because you know, oh, this makes sense. I'm supposed to feel sad in this moment. It's a sad part of the book. Now, if you're really lucky, that book might even tap into a huge range of emotions that allows you to experience this wealth of different emotions as you move from one moment to the next. Now, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite books that I've been listening to over the past year at the end of this episode to help give you some ideas of how you might implement this practice. But I am going to mention one that kind of sits, it's either right at the top or jostling for number one on my favorite listens this year. And it's the book Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. I loved this book so very much. It is phenomenal. And if you decide to read it, I highly encourage you to listen to the audio version because the reader is top notch. Okay, so this book has such a beautiful blend of dry, quick wit, which the narrator absolutely nails. And it's combined with these really deep messages of love and loss. I mean, this was a book that literally had me weeping one minute and then cackling with laughter the next. And I loved it so much. And when you can find a book like that, a book that really wraps you up into the story and it moves you in so many different ways, it provides such an incredible opportunity to learn how to be with all those different emotions and allow them without resisting them. Because you want to feel them. You want to be moved in the book. You want to have that experience. You're able to kind of shut off that part of your brain that's worried about, oh my gosh, something's gone wrong. I need to fix this. I shouldn't feel this way, right? Instead, you get to be with that experience in the book. And because it feels more natural to be with that experience, because it's not your current lived experience, you can start checking in with yourself. You can start asking yourself, oh, hold on. What does this emotion that I'm experiencing actually feel like? I notice I'm feeling really sad. I notice I'm literally crying. How do I feel this? Where do I notice that sensation in my body? As I'm feeling sad, is it a sinking in my chest? Is it a heaviness in my shoulders? Does my throat feel really tight as I'm crying? What is the actual sensation? Does my stomach feel like it's clenching or opening? What does it mean to physically experience the feeling of sadness or of grief? Because again, it's a literal vibration in your body. And it's so hard for us when we're in the heat of the moment in our lives to slow down and pause and notice how it's feeling. But when we can do it in a narrative that's removed from our life, we start to get to know how these emotions feel. And we start to show our brain that we can allow them. We can be with them. It's tolerable. It's okay. On the flip side, what does it feel like to experience humor and laughter and joy? How do I feel that in my body? What are those sensations? So again, by getting to know these feelings, we start expanding our capacity for them in our real life. which makes it so much easier for us to allow them when they arise in our own lives in different situations. And I'm telling you, this is magic. Now, this doesn't have to be something that you do strictly with books or audiobooks either. Okay. The same goes for movies and TV shows, even for music. So, for example, I am a crier. Okay. If I am happy, I cry. If I'm sad, I cry. If I'm angry, I cry. If I'm overwhelmed, I cry. I mean, my body just cries when I feel big emotions. It's not a problem. I've just decided that emotions leak from my eyes. This is what it is. Okay. So this exercise of checking in has really taught me to start recognizing the nuanced differences between my tears. So for example, let's talk about the movie Encanto, which is phenomenal if you have not yet seen this. So this movie had me crying throughout because it's brilliant. It is such a brilliant movie. I love it so much. And for example, when the older sister is singing, she's singing the song Pressure, and I cried. It was a very different sensation, a very different emotional experience from the final scene, which I will not describe in detail for those of you who have not yet seen it. But needless to say, I also cried, but they were very different tears streaming down my face, right? In my body, the emotional response was very nuanced. And because I was watching this narrative, I could check in and start noticing this because I was detached. It's not like it's in my own life. I'm just feeling the feeling. So with the first example, when the older sister is singing the song Pressure, I could feel that pressure she was singing about, right? I could experience it. It was in my chest. I felt the tightness there. I felt the heaviness on my shoulders. It was just like this huge weight pressing down. And that was very different than the love and the joy and the lightness. It was this huge expansion that I experienced in my body while crying still at the end. So again, watching that movie and getting really curious about the emotional experience allowed me to better understand the nuance of emotion, especially when it comes to crying and how that works for me and my body, in addition to, the standard tears that apparently accompany all my feelings. And then just for one more quick example, while I am pretty comfortable with my emotions overall and kind of allowing emotions, I've practiced it a lot. So I'm pretty good at allowing them. But there are two emotions that are still incredibly challenging for me to sit with. And these are secondhand embarrassment and humiliation. Okay. It is so uncomfortable for me. I hate sitting in it. And so when I'm feeling this secondhand embarrassment, my entire body just wants to shut down. I want to disappear. I want to get away from that situation as quickly as possible. I just want to crawl out of my skin. It is so uncomfortable. Needless to say, I'm not so great at sitting with these emotions. And one of the best ways that I've found to help me actually sit with the emotion long enough to understand how it feels in my body and to start so gradually expanding my capacity to be with those feelings is watching episodes of The Office. So if you have not yet watched this show, please do. But also do so knowing that it is quite possibly one of the most uncomfortable shows to watch out there. Seriously, it is so cringeworthy. It is so cringeworthy that when I first started watching it, I would literally leave the room several times per episode because I could not handle how uncomfortable my body was. But when I decided, you know what, I could turn this into an experiment. I can get curious about how my body's actually feeling. What does this feel like here? What are the sensations? When I started thinking in terms of sensations, it allowed me to stay present. So I would check in with what's going on in my body when that secondhand embarrassment of watching Michael Scott do whatever the heck he decided to do in that episode came up. I noticed my chest get so tight and my whole body would just like curve into itself. And I noticed this churning in my stomach, this restlessness in my legs, just like wanting to run away from the situation. But because my brain knew that it was safe, it wasn't actually happening to me, I had enough separation from the experience and I could learn how to allow these emotions so much more easily. It's like practicing being with the emotion with training wheels, because that unfolding situation is not actually happening in my life. So I could remind myself, we're just feeling the feeling. This isn't happening to you. We're just practicing feeling this experience, right? So that felt so much less intimidating But at the same time, I was able to expand my capacity to feel that emotion more. And I learned what it actually felt like in my body to have that secondhand embarrassment because I was able to pause a little bit longer to check in rather than just running away from it. Now, I did give you an example for TV and movie, but I personally generally love the practice most when I'm using audiobooks. This is personal, okay? Some of you might really love TV or movies or music more specifically, okay? I personally love using audiobooks, especially feeling heavier emotions, okay? Sadness, grief, shame, loss, hurt, anger, right? Also, really big, quote unquote, positive emotions, joy, love, excitement, delight, because again, many of us tend to feel uncomfortable with big emotions on both sides of the spectrum, right? Positive and negative, quote unquote. We tend to get uncomfortable with both. And what I love about audiobooks is for myself, they have such a beautiful way of really drawing me in and captivating my imagination. They really make me feel like I am part of that narrative. So I really experience those emotions in a big way. And it really helps me to open up and learn how they feel and learn that I can handle them, right? Now, when it comes to feelings like secondhand embarrassment, but also feelings like anxiousness and fear, I find that I do tend to prefer shorter TV shows and movies. Okay. Again, completely personal, but since I tend to get really invested in books, in stories, my mind loves to get stuck in that narrative, right? It gets really sucked into it and I experience those big feelings. So when it's a beautiful story or captivating characters or something, it's amazing, right? I have these big feelings, but also I have a really super active imagination. So books that tap into fear and anxiety for a really long period of time are not great for my brain, right? Thrillers, scary stories, those are not at the top of my must-read list. But I wanted to give some examples of both long form books and audiobooks, as well as visual storytelling, right? Through TV and film, that kind of thing, because everybody's going to have a different preference. So I encourage you to play around and see what lands the most with you. But essentially, the overarching practice that I invite you all to try is this. As you listen to your next audiobook or you watch your next TV show or your next movie, challenge yourself to check in with the emotions you're feeling throughout it. Now, I'll be the first to admit that it is pretty easy to kind of check out and essentially leave your body with these mediums because, again, a lot of us tend to use TV and movies and books as an escape. But rather than escaping entirely, rather than disconnecting entirely, I invite you to try staying connected to your body and noticing how you feel. Now, if you don't know the name of the emotion, that is not a problem at all. First and foremost, I'd love for you to really focus on the sensations. And what I mean by that is the literal physical feeling in your body. Where do you feel the joy, the sadness, the anxiousness, the secondhand embarrassment, right? Is it in your gut? Is it in your shoulders, your chest, your throat, your arms, your legs? Is it heavy? Is it light? Does it seem to be like it's expanding, opening up, or is it closing down? Is it sharp? Is it dull? There's no right or wrong answers here. And what's more, everybody's experience is going to be different, right? We all feel our emotions differently. So this is really a powerful opportunity for you to get to know your experience. Now, if you're looking for some recommendations of great audiobooks to consider, I've got you covered. I'm going to share some of my favorites that I have listened to this past year. Now, I do tend to listen to a pretty wide range of genres, except the aforementioned thriller and scary stuff. So I probably have at least one recommendation that will resonate with you. I will link to each of these episodes, or not episodes, each of these books in the show notes. And you can either get them on Audible, or if you have Libby or Hoopla, those apps, and a library card, many of these books are also available through your local library. So you can just sign up through the app, both Libby or Hoopla. Basically, they're connected to your local library, and then you can download the audiobook for a couple of weeks for free. And you're also supporting your library, which is super awesome. So I'm not sure if Hoopla and Libby are available outside the United States. So for those of you listening in other parts of the world, definitely check in with your local library, see if they have an app that allows you to check out audiobooks and ebooks and things online. But whether you do Audible, whether you do a library ebook or whatever, I highly encourage you to check out one of these books and start putting this exercise into practice. Okay, so let's do a quick overview of these books. I highly recommend giving them a listen. Up first, I guess it's kind of two that I'll start with. They're both by TJ Klune. The first is the book I already mentioned called Under the Whispering Door. The other is called The House in the Cerulean Sea. So I am recently obsessed with Klune's writing. His books are magical and thoughtful and touching, and manages to include this dry, witty humor that, again, has me literally laughing out loud throughout the books. I don't know how he does it. But Under the Whispering Door, it tells the story of Wallace Price. He's a man who dies and is taken to this strange tea house called Karen's Crossing. And Karen's Crossing is a place where the dead go to decide whether they're ready to move on to the afterlife or to remain in this tea house as a ghost. And again, it is this beautiful, heartwarming, humorous story about love and loss and finding a place to belong. It's so, so good. And again, I highly encourage you to listen to it because the reader is awesome. And then his other that I really love is The House in the Cerulean Sea. He has others that have just come out, and I'm just about to start one of them, but these two are at the top of my list right now. But The House in the Cerulean Sea is this really whimsical, beautiful story about acceptance and a found family and love. It's this story of Linus Baker. And he's this very, rule following, by the books caseworker. And he's a caseworker for the department in charge of magical youth. Okay, so it's fantasy. And he is sent on this special assignment to this orphanage where there are 6 supposedly very dangerous magical children. There's a gnome and a sprite and a wyvern and this green blob and a were Pomeranian and the Antichrist of all people. So throughout the story, Linus has just so many different powerful experiences that have him start questioning his own beliefs. And at the heart of the story, it's really this message of love and acceptance and finding your place in the world. It's so beautiful. Highly recommend. So again, those are both by TJ Klune. I will link to all of them in the show notes. My next recommendation is called The Reading List. And this is a book that basically follows this unlikely friendship between 2 very different people in a London suburb. So there's Alicia, who's this kind of anxious teenager, and she's working at a local library for the summer. And then there's Mukesh, who's this older man who recently lost his wife. And the two start meeting regularly or semi-regularly at the library to discuss these books that they're reading. And in their meetings, they start forming this really beautiful friendship as they learn and they grow together. And it's such a good story. Again, the reader, phenomenal. Okay, next book on my list that I highly recommend is Lessons in Chemistry. So this book follows the remarkable journey of Elizabeth Zott, who is a brilliant and unconventional chemist. And she's navigating this male-dominated world of science in the 1960s in California. And at the beginning of the book, she is unfairly fired from her research position. And she finds herself unexpectedly thrust into the limelight as the host of this cooking show called Supper at 6. And on the show, she manages to intertwine all of this knowledge that she has and this passion that she has for science into creating these amazing meals, while also inspiring women from all across the country to really start embracing their own intellect and all of the potential that they have. And the book is fantastic. It celebrates female empowerment and resilience and the pursuit of your dreams within the face of adversity. It's so good. Again, highly recommend. It is called Lessons in Chemistry. Up next is a pretty light, kind of fun read that is literally called Beach Read by Emily Henry. So this novel revolves around 2 neighboring writers. There's a best-selling romance author and then this highly acclaimed literary novelist. Okay, it's very much a beach read. Okay, it's a love story, but it is so well written. It is this tale of these 2 writers and They challenge one another's perspectives. They discover these unexpected connections. They navigate a bunch of complexities. And it's really this story about the power of stepping outside your comfort zone, of embracing new experiences, of confronting fears. And then, of course, in true romance beach read style, it has the witty banter and all these heartwarming moments, all the things. So if you are a lover of this type of book, I highly recommend Beach Read, and also all of Emily Henry's books. I mean, they're really quite good, all of them. All right, the last one that I'm going to mention today is a book called Remarkably Bright Creatures. Okay, this book, perhaps like the others, is going to sound a little bit weird on the surface because it follows the story of Tova Sullivan. She is a widow who develops an unlikely friendship with Marcellus, who's a giant Pacific octopus at a local aquarium. I know that sounds weird, but this story is so beautiful. And like the other books that I've mentioned, the narrator is on point. Okay. Now, the two can't actually talk to one another, but as the reader, you get insight into what Marcellus is thinking. And as their friendship develops, Marcellus helps Tova really start to confront her grief and uncover some long-buried truths about her missing son, while Tova helps Marcellus, the octopus, understand the world beyond the aquarium. So essentially, Remarkably Bright Creatures is this story about resilience of the human spirit. It's a story about the power of unexpected connections. Again, so good. So from magical youth to relationships with octopus to 1960s feminism and good old-fashioned rom-coms, I mean, this is a list that has plenty to choose from. So if you're looking for a good book to listen to put this exercise that we talked about today into practice, if you want to use one of these stories to start tapping into the bigger emotions as you expand your capacity to be with them, I highly recommend any of the above that I just mentioned. I will link to them in the show notes. Also, I am desperately searching for new authors, a new series, anything like that. So if you have a book that you've read or listened to and you just loved it, or you can't stop thinking about it, or whatever, please share it with me. Please be a rock star. Send it my way. I would love to hear about it. You can connect with me over on Instagram. I am at I'm Busy Being Awesome. You can either drop the recommendation in the post for this episode or just send me a DM. I would love to hear about it. Also, I'd love to hear what you think about any of the books that you explore from this list and to hear about how this exercise works for you. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you're ready to take these concepts deeper and apply them to your life, if you're ready to learn how to support your ADHD in a way that works for you, then I invite you to check out today's show notes or head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/group to learn more about my small group coaching program, We're Busy Being Awesome. And if it sounds like a great fit for you, you can add your name to the waitlist and you'll be the first to know when the next cohort opens. Also, have you grabbed the podcast roadmap yet? It has the most popular episodes all detailed for you, so you can get yourself up to speed and ready to work with your ADHD brain. You can grab it now through the show notes or head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/map. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.